Shirreff from Salisbury in the UK. He's a former NATO commander and UK military chief. Just the man to speak to about this. Sir, what could Russian forces be trying to achieve with this so-called axis of advance?
I think they're trying to fix the Ukrainians. I think they're trying to force the Ukrainians to divert reserves and resources to counter their own attacks in order to prevent the Ukrainians mounting their own counteroffensive. But of course, the first thing they're trying to do is to break through themselves. Here we are nearly a year later after the launch of the so-called special military operation. Putin and the Russians have signally failed to achieve their aims. They've been pushed back quite successfully, or very successfully, by the Ukrainians. They're still holding on. And what we've seen in the last weeks, months, particularly since the end of the Ukrainians' very successful offensive in Kherson in November, has been a very attritional battle in Luhansk province, with the Russians trying to batter their heads against the brick wall of Bakhmut, losing vast numbers of casualties on a First World War scale of casualties, and the Ukrainians holding on successfully. But ultimately, the Russians are trying A, to break through, and B, to fix the Ukrainians.
In terms of this axis of advance, the MOD in the UK saying it's unlikely Russia's even got the sufficient amount of what they call uncommitted troops in the area to achieve any kind of significant breakthrough. We're just hearing from our correspondent Dasha Chernisheva there about expansion within the Russian reservists. What do we know about numbers of troops in Russia that they have at their disposal?
Well, this is quite a bold call by the UK's Minister of Defence to make. So they must be basing it on pretty strong intelligence and information. Otherwise, I don't think they would risk sticking their heads above the parapet and getting it wrong. What it tells us is that Russia, despite its vast reserves of manpower and womanpower, is finding it increasingly difficult to generate effective combat power from mobilization. You've just been talking about the chaos of that first mobilization, illegally mobilized young men, but also those who did get through were given virtually no training at all and used as effectively as bullet catchers, forced into the line and lost their lives in great numbers. Taking manpower off the streets, conscripting manpower, and turning that manpower into effective soldiers capable of fighting a modern combined arms battle in the 21st century takes time, it takes resources, takes training, takes a significant and very efficient training organization. And by all accounts, the appearance of the Russian army suggests that they do not have that. So I think that even if they are in the business of mobilizing significantly new numbers of manpower, it will take time for that to filter through and have an effect on the battlefield.
And amid all of this, ongoing negotiations about military aid from various countries, the UK, while we've got you, Richard, let's get your input on this, because the UK is saying it won't provide fighter jets to Ukraine alongside the US. PM Sunak actually saying it wouldn't be practical, this was his words, because F-16s fighter jets, they're extremely sophisticated, take months to learn how to fly. Do you understand that reasoning?
Well, my view is where there's a will, there's a way. And what this demonstrates is at the moment there isn't a will. If this decision had been taken 11 months ago, by now Ukrainian fighter pilots would be trained. But I'm afraid this is more foot dragging from Britain, from Western powers. Now, that is not to take away the really important and significant aid that has been given and continues to be given. But we still are facing a fundamental blockage that says that is essentially forcing the Ukrainians to continue to fight with one hand tied behind their backs. If Ukraine is given the tools to do the job, to use Churchill's phrase from 1941 to the Americans, then Ukraine will be able to do the job. If they're not given the tools to do the job, I fear that we could be in for a very long stalemated war. The way to avoid that, as I say, is to concentrate effort, to give Ukraine what it needs, and to get on with it. And that includes fighter jets.
Sir Richard Shirreff, former NATO commander, speaking to us from the UK. Thank you.